A farmer understands the needs of every season, and so do Farm Bureau members. When Arkansas families needed electricity, our members brought it. Reliable roads, our members built them. Agricultural education, our members provided. Today's members may not live on a farm, but their connections are as close as ever. So when that difficult season comes, no member has to face it alone. For every season, Arkansas Farm Bureau. Join today.
Welcome back. Well, if you've watched television at all this summer, you've likely seen constant campaign ads for candidates for U.S. Senate. But you may not have seen ads for all of the Senate candidates. While Democrat Mark Pryor and Republican Tom Cotton get the headlines, there are two other men running for the seat this year, and they are with us this morning. Nathan LaFrance, Libertarian, and Mark Swaney, the Green Party candidate. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here, first of all. Let's start with that setup, the campaign ads and the millions of dollars that are spent on the Democratic and Republican side. And Nathan, we'll start with you. Sure. How do you compete with that?
You know, it's a tough hill to climb when you're competing against that kind of money and that kind of resources. For a small party, you know, a candidate with limited resources, social media is a big asset. I'm trying to be very active in reaching out to people and spreading the word about the platform, the ideas involved with the campaign through social media, Facebook, Twitter, and then getting out there and meeting the people. You know, there are dozens and dozens of festivals and fairs and things like that throughout the state, and just getting out and being able to speak to the people, getting face recognition, just that one-on-one time with the voters, I think is a big benefit.
Do you feel that that is helping? We'll go to you.
Yeah, we do the same things that he just mentioned, because that's what you have to do, because it's all you can do. I don't have millions of dollars. I was fortunate to get some campaign contributions, and so I have bumper stickers and yard signs and buttons that I've mailed to and passed out at festivals to people that are supporters. But he said it right the first time, it's tough. It's not an easy thing to do.
And you guys both mentioned going out to festivals and stuff, but you know, the other candidates are going there too. I mean, every festival that you're at, there's bound to be at least half a dozen other political candidates there. I spent a day recently with Tom Cotton. He had four campaign events in a day. Sure. About how many are you guys hitting? Do you feel that you know, just one festival, or how do you spend your weekends or spend your days? Because they're filling them too.
They are. You know, for me personally, I have a lot of family obligations. You know, my full-time job outside of campaigning, so it is a challenge. You know, a few festivals a month is what I've been able to do so far. I'm really hoping to increase that as we go on. But you're right, the other candidates are there as well, and it's, you know, for me, it's about having the right message and conveying that to people and changing voters' minds one at a time.
Yeah, I have the same issue. I'm a full-time employee. I work for a living, which in my opinion ought to be considered a plus for a candidate, because recently it was reported that the majority of Congress are millionaires. And millionaires quickly, in my opinion, lose touch with what it's like to not be a millionaire and to be a working person. So if a working person wants to see their issues reflected in the policies of Congress, they ought to consider giving a working person a chance to get into office.
Well, the policies have been pretty well documented as far as where the two stand. They're always separating themselves on a lot of the major issues. Is there any issue in particular that either one of you feels like you really stand out on, something that neither of the candidates can offer?
Sure. Well, I can tell you that when it comes to the Fourth Amendment right to privacy here in America, both Tom Cotton and Mark Pryor have been very weak in that issue when it comes to supporting the president and his administration with what the NSA has been doing, all the scandals we've seen there. Tom Cotton has voted continuously against measures to rein in, halt the NSA spying on Americans here in the U.S., and Pryor has been a big supporter of the Obama administration's intelligence gathering as well.
What about you, Mark?
Well, I'd have to agree with Nathan on that issue, but the Green Party separates itself in this race from the other parties on the issue of climate change and protecting the environment. Frankly, I see the issue of climate change as singly the most important challenge to the entire world, and that obviously includes Arkansas. And I have been highlighting the problems with climate change, and I have called for a tax on carbon as one thing that could be and should be done to make carbon less attractive and therefore make non-polluting alternatives more attractive. But that is not a position at all held by either Mark Pryor or Tom Cotton.
We've got about 30 seconds left. I wanted to ask, realistically, what percentage of the vote would you hope to get and would consider a success in November?
Honestly, I'd love to get the majority of the votes in the race. If I can poll in the double digits as we approach Election Day and reach those levels, I think it would be a big success story for the campaign.
Mr. Swaney?
I would hazard no guess.
Yeah.
I would say that if we get votes, if I get votes, I will be considering this campaign a success.
Your top issue, Mark, you said, is climate change. And you talked
Yes.
about wanting a carbon tax. Can you talk a little bit more about how that would work? Are you talking about just for businesses? Are you talking about individuals included in this as well?
I think it would be both businesses and individuals. However, I think that the carbon tax would be set up in a way that there would be rebates.
Okay.
So that on a sliding scale, persons at the lower end of our income scale would get rebates that would probably more than make up for the extra cost of their carbon usage. Of course, people on the lower end of the income scale tend not to use much carbon anyway, but we don't want to impact them because they're already struggling to survive on small incomes. But as we go up the income bracket, the rebates would decline. Now, overall, my opinion is that, and I may be alone on this, that we need to have this be revenue positive. A lot of people mention a carbon tax and say they want to make it revenue neutral. I disagree with that. I think the government should bring in more money, and the money that's brought in by the carbon tax ought to be applied by the government to ameliorate the effects of climate change and find solutions for excess carbon pollution.
Interesting. All right, you mentioned the Fourth Amendment and hit on a few hot button issues that we've definitely faced in this last year as one of the key issues that separates you from the other folks running for this office. So tell me a little bit more about that. What is it that you feel you could do in the Senate when it comes to the issue of the Fourth Amendment?
Sure. Well, the Fourth Amendment is just one of the prime examples
Sure.
of what the major parties have done over the last decades, several decades, and that is the accumulation of power in government over various areas of the country, whether it's personal issues, economic issues, privacy issues. Both major parties today seek additional power because that additional power and control equals more money and more money for campaigns. So when it comes to the Fourth Amendment, honestly, what we need to do is hold the administration accountable for what are apparent violations of the Fourth Amendment. The NSA, other intelligence agencies do not have a mandate or a right to spy on Americans domestically. And right now, neither House of Congress has held the administration accountable on this issue.
I'm sorry, Janelle, I was just going to ask, say both of you, in your own respects, win the race. Yeah. You'd be the only Libertarian in Congress. You'd be the only Green Party candidate in Congress. How would you get any traction on either one of those issues?
Well, I know what I would do. I'd talk to all the Democrats, and there are some Republicans as well that agree on this issue. As a matter of fact, I'm totally in Nathan's corner on what he's expressed about NSA spying, and I'll add to that that I'm outraged that the President has claimed that the Fifth Amendment clause that says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. He claims that doesn't mean you get a trial. He claims he has the right to execute Americans without trial and to do it in secret if he wishes. This is another civil liberties issue that we take a great deal of offense at, and I would work with other members of Congress, particularly possibly Rand Paul, who suggested that he's not very happy about that, and find some bipartisan, actually maybe tripartisan support for reining in these excessive claims of power by the government.
Just to follow up on that, if I'm elected into the U.S. Senate, that stage gives you a big platform to be able to speak to the American people. And the American people are not happy with what's happening in Washington right now. Congress has an approval rating of 6 or 7%. President Obama, I saw today, is down to 39%. The American people aren't happy. They do not appreciate what's going on in Washington, whether it's NSA spying scandal, whether it's Obamacare, many other issues. And being able to speak to the people of Arkansas and to the American people as a U.S. Senator, I think will really energize the American people and get people talking and more active and more involved in government, and hopefully push for change.
Even with the gridlock, though, I mean, would it be one of those circumstances where, you know, you do become the swing vote, if you will, in the Senate? It certainly could be a toss-up. We never know. We don't know which way anything's going to break.
I've never heard the word tripartisan before, so you guys have enlightened me with that. What about some of the issues that are kind of center stage right now? Take immigration, for instance, with the crisis at the southern border with unaccompanied children coming over. What would a Libertarian and a Green Party candidate do about that?
Well, I can tell you from my viewpoint, this is the land of the free. This is a country where we have historically opened our borders and welcomed everyone. My family is, you know, descendants from immigrants, as are the majority of Americans. Our immigration laws are broken. People that try to follow the law and become American citizens through the process go through years of paperwork and ordeal just to complete that process. And so what we need to do is fix our laws, essentially. We need to streamline the process and allow people that want to come to our country either to work or to become citizens to do that in a very expedient and efficient manner.
What about those kids, though? What should be done with the kids without the parents crossing the border?
You know, that's a good question. To be honest, we need to take care of them. We need to reunite them with their families. Okay. That's the short of it. These children need to be reunited with their parents.
Mark?
I think that, first of all, the most important thing is to look at the humanitarian issue. And the strength of the United States of America worldwide and historically has always rested on perception of the United States of America being a moral nation, moral in the sense of caring about human beings as human beings and having certain standards for how we deal with human beings. And when we put little children alone in prison cells and lock them up for days at a time, or return them to situations where they're subject to murder and torture and all kinds of terrible things, then we are destroying the strength of our country. We're actually attacking our national security by not providing humanitarian solutions to these problems. Now, if it's expensive, then we should spend the money. If it's difficult, we should do it. We don't say that, oh, it's too expensive for us to look after our national security when we're talking about North Korea or Russia or China. So I think that we have to start solving a very difficult problem by realizing that we have to, as a nation, live up to our moral standards and treat these people humanitarianly. And that's the simplest way. It would take too long to go into all the other details that we should do.
But does that also include, I mean, a lot of these children are fleeing from Honduras because of the drug cartels, because of problems that essentially are brought on by drug trafficking. I mean, does that include taking the moral imperative, if you will, overseas, so the problem of the children fleeing to the United States to escape the violence stops there?
Well, it's a good thing that you mentioned Honduras, because one of the things about this crisis that's not being mentioned, but which is a major cause in the particular case of Honduras, is the coup d'etat that occurred there 4 years ago. And this coup d'etat didn't have anything to do with the drug problem. But the United States was very remiss, in my opinion, in not supporting legitimate government in Honduras. And the new government that came in has done a very poor job. And there is chaos in the country right now. The police are uniformly described as corrupt and actually cooperating with the criminals and the drug gangs. And so when you've got a broken government, you're going to have drug gangs and criminal gangs, not just drugs. Any kind of criminal activity is going to naturally flourish. And it's gotten to crisis proportions in Honduras. So we made some mistakes in Central America, and so it's not going to be easy to correct those. But I think you make a good point. We're going to have to go back to those countries and say, what are the problems there? And start trying to solve the problem at the source. But as I said, it's not going to be easy. No one would say it was.
Last question for you before we wrap up. I know also on your website you're big on a balanced budget amendment and also term limits for Congress. How would you possibly get that done in what's going on in Washington today?
That's true.
Well, when it comes to term limits, it starts with one. And I would be that first vote and the first member there that I'm aware of that would be actually drafting legislation to push through term limits. It goes again to this whole cycle of constantly needing to raise money, give favors to special interests and things of that nature. If we can implement term limits, we can end that cycle.
How many terms would you suggest?
For U.S. senators, I would suggest 2 terms.
2 terms. So you would pledge to only stay 2 terms even if you didn't get the amendment through?
I would actually, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as far as the balanced budget, again, we're a country that's approaching $20 trillion in debt. We have unfunded liabilities in the tens of trillions of dollars over the next several decades with federal programs. And I believe that it's time we take that ability of lawmakers to spend money that we don't have as a country away from them, because they've obviously mismanaged it and proven that they can't be responsible.
Well, guys, our time has gone very quickly once again. We're going to have to break it off there, but we thank you once again for coming in. Nathan LaFrance and Mark Swaney, Green Party, Libertarian, hoping for tri-partisan. That's going to stick with me. We'll be right back.